Chicago, home of Al Capone, home of the Chicago typewriter, and home of Chicago jazz. Chicago gets a lot of flack as being one of the most violent cities in the United States, which it technically is, but I'm going to explain why it's not what you think. Besides the corruption, which is not cool, like, whatsoever, Chicago is notorious for shootings, murders, and gang-affiliated activity. Also some unlivable winters and tolerable summers, albeit I quite like the winters, but I guess that's just personal preference. Now for a quick, super simplified history. Between 1914 and 1960, many mistreated and disenfranchised Black Americans from the South moved to Chicago to seek economic freedom. The exodus of Blacks from the rural South was called the Great Migration. Pretty soon, urban white Northerners started to get worried because anyone who produces melanin isn't human in their eyes. Eventually, these whites pushed for segregation to force Black and Irish people into poor neighborhoods, utilizing redlining, which is basically saying you can't buy this house because you don't look like me. Oh, and yes, I said Irish, because in the 1960s, Irish were not considered white. It was hard for many Blacks to find jobs and find decent places to live because of the competition for housing among different groups of people. And this, in conjunction with the city's lack of care for these neighborhoods, led to the creation of Chicago's ghettos. The only good thing about these ghettos was that the living conditions were just conducive enough to produce some great artists. In my opinion, of course. You see, the thing is, these ghettos are not all over the city. People always say that if they go to Chicago, they'll get shot right in the middle of downtown, which is simply not true. Take Seattle, for example, generally considered one of the safest metropolises in the United States. Seattle does not really have any bad neighborhoods per se. A Seattleite might disagree and claim Tacoma is the most dangerous neighborhood in the world, but if a Chicagoan came to check out how bad Tacoma is, they would simply laugh. The thing is that the crime in Seattle is so dispersed that you can actually get shot and mugged in downtown Seattle. Partly because of Chaz, which is a whole other topic in and of itself, but mostly because of the ridiculous amount of homeless people. Imagine it like a chocolate chip cookie. The chocolate is the crime. If you were to visit Seattle at any random place, you have a chance of being a victim of a crime. Like taking a bite from the cookie and tasting a little bit of chocolate. Now, Chicago is like one of those weird cookies with just one chocolate chip. You have a chance of taking a bite out of the cookie and tasting no chocolate. Just like in Chicago, you could visit downtown and be perfectly safe. You also could take a bite from the cookie and get a mouthful of chocolate, which would be like walking into the wrong neighborhood in Chicago at 3 a.m. I speak from personal experience. The point is, the crime in Chicago is extremely localized in concentrated areas. Just stay away from those areas if you value life, and you'll never hear a gunshot. Now for some pros about Chicago. It's extremely flat. I'm not sure about you, but I hate driving, walking, and biking in hilly areas. It's just an immense pain, especially for construction. Oh, and landslides. Cheap housing. The rent here is incredibly cheap for such a big city. Compared to other big cities, Chicago is like a gold mine. No natural disasters. Tornadoes might happen outside the city, but there are no earthquakes, no hurricanes, no forest fires, no typhoons, no tsunamis, no volcanoes, and it is not threatened by rising sea levels. Unless you consider extreme cold a natural disaster, Chicago is not threatened by Mother Nature. Population density. Chicago is a very spread out city, and as a result, you won't see as many people walking downtown as, say, New York. It's a big city that does not feel crowded and overflowing. Because of this, it is an extremely clean city, New York, with all the amenities you could ask for. Now, you might say, well, Chicago's losing population because they know it's a terrible city. I would refute this by saying that the people who are leaving are from those aforementioned terrible neighborhoods. Since those neighborhoods are technically in Chicago, it tarnishes the city's overall statistics and reputation. In conclusion, Chicago has a tremendous amount of amenities that are always overshadowed by its notorious reputation and constantly attacked and talked down upon by the contemporary zeitgeist. Yes, the corruption is bad, and yes, the crime is bad. But if you know where you are and where to avoid, Chicago can be an amazing city that is criminally underrated.
I am just a schemer, trying to turn you non-believers into dreamers.